workshops and other materials for people to learn. It's a community fork of recently closed source Mapbox rendering stack with 100% open source implementation of vector tile rendering, and it remains to be open source with open source governance. It's quite a popular project despite being alive only since December. And if you want to know more, the easiest is to go to the project website at maplibre.org. Where you can find links to all the documentations and also demonstration of the map. The library is unique in the ability to use WebGL and OpenGL for rendering the maps. So you see these flying effects, but you can interact with the map, and that's the biggest difference to OpenLayers or Leaflet, which are other alternative open source libraries. Under About and Projects, you find the links to documentation and especially to GitHub and the community. GitHub is in here. It is an open source project. We are in fact applying for OSGeo membership, and it's quite related to OpenStreetMap. So if you use Google Maps API or another providers, like this is open source alternative to Google. If you combine the open data with MapLibre and the visualizations, you get something similar. It's all about vector tiles and displaying the vector tiles in a browser and in mobile devices. It's often used with Open Map Tiles project, which provides the vector tiles, free vector tiles for OpenStreetMap. And now it's also used by commercial mapping providers, multiple. The story of MapLibre. In fact, in December last year, Mapbox has announced that their Great Mapbox GL JS library has been a closed source, so they switched the license from BSD license to Mapbox terms, and whoever loads the library in a browser through JavaScript needs to pay Mapbox for initiating the library, which is quite a unique license. This also means, unfortunately, that independently whether you use some Mapbox services or not with the library, suddenly you had to pay for initializing the code. And that's where quite a big of wave on the community appeared, because the previously available license BSD provided much more freedom on ability to load the maps from your own server. And that's why in fact MapLibre was born. So within a couple of hours, there was a first meeting of people who created forks on GitHub and who met on Hacker News and discussed what needs to be done on the project to have a viable alternative to the closed source code. And these forks were then merged into one fork, and we try to duplicate all the efforts and really focus on one fork, which is going to be the one taken on by community. Essential from the beginning on was really defining that this doesn't happen again. So there is no control of a single company over the code base, and that there is open source governance defined in the community. And we also discussed quite a lot how to motivate people to contribute. So really on December 9, we all wrote memorandum, the 4 people who created the forks on GitHub, and defined these rules, published it on Twitter, and it has had quite a good response on the social media. So this was the beginning. In fact, the name MapLibre comes from a map library reborn, or MapLibre as freedom in the mapping. So Libre, the freedom part. And Yuri is the one who contributed with the name. The MapLibre has two parts. One is a JavaScript rendering inside of a web browser, um, which gives you the 2.5D rendering of maps where you can tilt and rotate. And it uses hardware acceleration on a GPU. Um, it's accurate and interactive way how to display vector tiles, especially, but also raster tiles in a browser with no tracking at all and ability to bring in plugins and additional functionality. And it helps you to create your own application with JavaScript, with the functions and modern interaction with the maps. Um, it's pretty easy to start, in fact. All what you need is 20 lines of HTML and you have a map which is zoomable. So anybody can really start to use MapLibre instead of Leaflet or other libraries. Not a big deal. It's all based around the style JSON and the GL JS is loading the vector tiles in the MBT format, and the styles are in the GL JS specification. There is a great documentation with APIs and examples launched. So if you are on the website of MapLibre, here is sorry, the GLJS set of reference documentation with examples taken over from the latest version of Mapbox and rewritten to load the MapLibre library. And that's the great way how to start to learn and try different functions of the software. Recently, we've launched also YouTube tutorials for beginners. So if you are really new into mapping and are just starting with polygons and lines and markers, you can just Google MapLibre tutorials and you will find these online and it will guide you through. The other part of the library, so next to the JavaScript, there is also native implementation, which in fact shows the same styles. The maps looks exactly the same, but instead of implementation of the rendering in JavaScript, this is done in C++ and OpenGL ES with shaders which are shared between the code. And this gives you ability to create native application on Android and iOS and other Android-based devices, including Qt, embedded source code, and like Windows and other compiled implementation of the native code. It provides the same rendering capabilities, the same functionality, and it's practically an alternative to Google Maps SDK on Android or Apple MapKit, which you may use in native applications, but fully open source with BSD license and ability to adjust everything what you need to adjust in the code. In fact, Mapbox has decided to close down this part of the previously open source code base back in April, and therefore MapTiler, the company where I work in, we started to work on iOS and Android SDK based on the latest fork, and then it was released and merged into MapLibre. So we contributed with the code back to the MapLibre organization, and now it's with the open source community governance maintained further and improved by more people and multiple companies. The Android has a wrapper with Kotlin and Java. The iOS is with Swift and Objective-C usable. There are also ports for Mac in Qt, and you can contribute with other bindings and define your own usage on top of the native code. Everything is with the BSD license as previously. There is no telemetry, no tracking of the users, complete privacy, and true open source. And thanks to Amazon developers, there is now also implementation of Apple Metal. So nowadays it's quite safe also for the future version of iOS devices. To write your own application, it's also relatively easy in like 30 lines on Android and 20 lines on iOS. You have a very basic application, and we will have a presentation about mobile applications just after this block. So if you stay on this track, you will hear more. There are documentations for these iOS and Android from the times when MapTiler launched these SDKs. So you can go to maptiler.com/docs and see their tutorials and try to develop your own app on your own. What is the status of the project and what is coming next on MapLibre? We really had a lot to plan. So the initial part of the project was really all about setting up the community governance, launching the GitHub repository, and deciding who is the steering committee, how to run the open source project in a proper way, that there is correct delegation of the control and voting, and everything is set up the way it should be. Then we were very keen on having the stable release with the JavaScript, and also release of iOS and Android. This has been successful thanks to the community contribution. There already come up the examples and reference documentation on the website, which has been ported to MapLibre from the original latest version of Mapbox. We launched the project website and YouTube tutorials. Now in progress, there is the metal rendering with on iOS, which is under development, especially from the contribution from Amazon team. Ongoing is a huge rewrite of the JavaScript library into TypeScript. So that's something what will be published together on the upcoming release 2.0, and 3D terrain visualization is also on the plan for 2.0. If everything goes well, it's going to be merged and become part of 2.0 release. For the future, there are a couple of ideas, but it's all really driven by the people who are keen to contribute, and by the different teams and individuals who work on the features. So if you have your own idea, feel free to join on choosemaplibre.org or GitHub. You find links to Slack, where the community is very actively speaking, and you can just talk about anything, any idea you have. And feel free to create an issue on GitHub, discuss. There's also a discussion forum on GitHub, so you can just talk, propose anything what you would like to implement, and if there is good feedback from the community, it can be easily accepted as a pull request into the code base. Some of the cool things which we were talking about is ability potentially to show the world, like have a switcher to be able to show the globe. You zoom out instead of a Mercator, and quite a big thing has been also about potential ability to add support for custom coordinate systems, non-Mercator, because that's essential for the national government bodies, and cadastral maps, and other people who need the local coordinate systems. So those are things together with like closer binding to OpenLayers and Leaflet, which are really discussed and proposed. Because MapLibre has become the reference implementation of the vector tiles, we were talking about different approaches, how we can move on with the JSON specification of the styles and propose adjustments the way that the open source community accept them. So that's about the roadmap and what has been done. If you have ideas, as I said, you are very welcome to join, propose, choose GitHub, and discuss on Slack anything related to the project. Who is in control? Currently, there is a steering committee, so technical steering committee, which anybody who is actively contributing to the project can join. We are meeting once per month through the video calls and discuss directions of the project and potential proposals which needs discussion. Also, the governance of the project is practically happening on these meetings. Currently, there are 4 board members, which were the original 4 people who formed the project in the beginning, and there is going to be democratical voting for the new 4 members in the board, in the steering board, which is proposed latest by the next FOSS4G. The project is not organically grown, but it's made out of the latest Mapbox open source version. But it has already attracted quite a viable community and people who are contributing, practically using it, and really discussing. What we have learned from launching MapLibre is really supporting the community is hard work. You need to put a lot of effort into like having the project properly communicated out, having the logos and also channels for people to discuss, and feeling for you contribute that it's welcome, and that there are no blockers, and there are really no blockers on this project. Open source project needs time and patience. That's another big part of lessons learned here. And if there is no community, there is really no really project, because it needs multiple people who benefit, who have their needs, and who want to push the project forward. And I'm really glad that these people find themselves in the project and meet and regularly talk and move on working on the next version. Yeah, another thing we have learned is better than to ask for money is to ask for active developers. So if we are talking to a bigger corporation, it's easier for them, and also more essential for the open source project to have people actively working, and this has happened. So there are people contributing from multiple companies to the project and synchronizing the effort on their side. In the beginning, we were also looking for foundations for legal protections to avoid any issues, but we have learned from that the foundations and organization usually don't provide you proactively the legal protection. They act in the moment of threat or a problem, and therefore the more important part is being sure that the project doesn't accept any legally problematic parts in the contribution from the community. That's why we have, as one of the next big things, also scanning of the back compatibility on the code as part of continuous integration process. So if there are pull requests, we are sure now we are carefully reviewing, and we are sure in the future also through the automated matters that no code has been copy and pasted from another code basis. It would be great if you really join the project. It's pretty easy if you want to migrate from Mapbox to MapLibre. There are multiple tutorials and also bindings to React.js, Vue, and others. And if you are really using NPM and dependencies in your code, then the switch is relatively easy. The version 1 is back compatible. Now, in fact, we have 1.15. So you can load the latest MapLibre GL, use the NPM as a dependency, and just switch the existing code to MapLibre. And more documentation for the React and other bindings are then available on GitHub and on maplibre.org. Feel free to dig deeper in the project. So after you start to use it, and if you discover a bug or anything what needs improvement, please report this as issue. There are people actively talking and communicating around the issues on GitHub. And if you have a bit of time, writing documentation as you learn is the best way how to contribute to any project in the open source, not only to MapLibre. And it would be very, very welcome on this project. If you don't have time, or if you are a company who is actively using MapLibre in your commercial product, it would be really lovely to either donate people who are contributing to the project, or provide a financial donation. So we may have potentially in the future some budget to support grants on development of the features and also on the maintenance of the project. So the summary, we have went through the introduction of the MapLibre. What was the story, the two different versions, the JavaScript and native implementation, status of the project, roadmap, what is coming up, the release 2.0 on JavaScript and new Metal on Android, and what we have learned from the community and how to join the project. So that's all for this presentation. Would be very glad to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much. In version 1, we are fully compatible. In version 2, we may start to introduce new adjustments, and the two projects will diverge. So it's not necessarily planned to implement everything what is in Mapbox 2.0 and farther. The project has its own path and different feature set and different APIs, but there is a need to remain as close as possible with the compatibility for people to easily migrate. I believe Flutter is already supported, and I don't know about React Native, because the native part is, React JS is. It's all community project, so whoever needs the wrapper in React Native, the native, like MapLibre native, can be wrapped in React Native. So I perhaps it's already done on GitHub. Just check on GitHub, and it can be for sure migrated from MapLibre latest open source version to from Mapbox latest open source version to MapLibre. So answer is perhaps yes. I mentioned that open layers and Leaflet doesn't have this tilt, and they are not hardware accelerated by default. MapLibre is heavily based on WebGL and vector tiles and font rendering on the client side. So all these things differ in the performance and ability to display a large number of data. Leaflet is really about raster tiles mostly and basic API. MapLibre is more about the visualizations. OpenLayers is excellent if you have advanced features requirements such as custom coordinate systems or ability to load various formats. So the three really each has their own use case.